Hello again and welcome to our second video that we're producing in relation to our pensions claim. As promised, we were going to address some of the questions that weren't covered by the FAQ document on our website, and we'll get through a load of those today, hopefully about a 20-minute video. As previously, National Vice Chair Shay Donald, and I have the privilege of asking questions of
Alex Duncan, the National Secretary.
Superb. So without any further ado, we're going to get straight in and on with the questions. Alex, first question. Since we've obviously opened up this claims window, how many claims have we received?
The last update I had, which is a couple of days ago now, we had about 23,000 applications. That number's going up daily as we roll out to forces, and some forces in fact will have only recently had the link or can expect to see it in the next day or so. We've then got to catch up with the officers who have left the service, and we'll be reaching out to them as well to give them the opportunity to claim.
All right, so we've got roughly a month to go before the window closes. Any expectation or anticipation of how many claims you're looking to get in total, roughly?
No, not really, because I mean, we know that we've got certainly anything up to 60,000 members who are potentially eligible to claim. That doesn't mean they all will, of course. This is all about the compensation. Some will feel that they want to claim for that, some will not. This is about giving them the opportunity, really, rather than making anybody do anything.
Superb, thank you. Quite a few questions coming in around the questionnaire that officers fill out when they get the link in. And particularly, there's one question which talks about costs and compensation. Now, the issue that's causing concern is within the wording, it talks about if costs are awarded, the officer or member will have to pay this back to the Police Federation or Penningtons. So I thought this claim wasn't going to cost anyone applying anything. Can you give a bit more clarity around that?
Yeah, certainly. So costs are different to compensation. If the court awards a member compensation for injury to feelings, that belongs to the member and they'll keep that. The court, in addition, may or may not decide to award some of the costs back for the cost of running the claim. So that's in addition to any compensation. Obviously, PFEW is paying for the cost of this claim. And if the court don't award any of those costs, then it will fall on PFEW to have paid for them. But if the court does decide that in addition to compensation, it's right and proper to effectively award some of those costs back, that comes back to PFEW because we're the people that have paid for it. So it doesn't cost the member anything. It's just that if the court makes a decision in respect of the cost of litigating, that money would go back to PFEW as the people who have paid the bill.
So just to be absolutely clear, the claim that's being brought is against that specific chief and government, yeah? And if the judge decides that litigation costs should be awarded to PFEW, if it goes to that particular member, they just give it back to the Police Federation, but they keep all the compensation.
Absolutely. So the compensation is the members. Any compensation awarded remains with the member.
Thank you. There's also quite a few questions from members who are already engaged in a claim. So we know that there's a group that have currently got a claim lodged with the Employment Tribunal. But in some of the FAQs it said that if you're already involved in a claim, you can't join the PFEW claim. So aren't we discriminating against those members by not allowing them this opportunity?
No, not at all. I mean, it's a fact of law that you can't effectively have two claims for the same matter because you'd effectively be taking two cases simultaneously. Right. So the fact they've already got a claim means that they can't lodge a separate claim for the same issue. What they can, of course, do, if they choose to, is to change their legal representation to another firm. And in this case, we will be giving people the opportunity who've got existing claims, if they choose to do so, to swap to legal representation paid for by the Police Federation as we enter into that whole compensation phase. That doesn't mean that we pick up retrospectively the bill that's incurred. That obviously predated the Police Federation having any involvement in that claim, but it does mean that further costs going forward will be paid for by the Police Federation if people choose to use, as in this case, Penningtons.
So just to be clear, if you decided to join the Federation claim, the claim where it sits in the Employment Tribunal currently stays there. All you're effectively doing is changing the person who's representing you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard that some people were concerned that if they were to go down this route, it would affect the amount of compensation.
That's my next question.
Sorry. But in danger of anticipating your next question, I have heard some people wondering whether it would have an effect on the level of compensation awarded. And the simple answer is no, because it's the same claim. The claim doesn't get withdrawn from the tribunal. In fact, all you're doing is changing your legal representative. And the claim remains the same, to be considered in exactly the same way as it would do if you choose to remain with your current legal representative.
Superb. Well, thank you for that. The next question is costs, right? And I know in the previous video that we did, you said there was commercially sensitive information and we couldn't disclose around costs. But it's created another discussion. And the questions coming in relation to costs and the wider remit is that why is PFEW taking this claim? Most members actually aren't interested in compensation. What they really want is their pensions back. If they can be put back on the old scheme, that's exactly what they want. So aren't we actually wasting members' money, particularly if the compensation award is so derisory? And let's suck a figure out the air, £200. Aren't we wasting tons of money pursuing a compensation claim for what is effectively only a small amount to get back?
I think there's a couple of things I'd say to that. So the first is that there's a difference when you take a group claim. Actually, there is benefits in numbers. So the cost per claim is considerably reduced than it would be if, for example, you were taking an individual claim, because a lot of the litigation costs will still remain the same. I mean, yes, there are more administration costs, but actually there's a lot to be said for the value that the scale of numbers brings. So actually, because of the numbers we're talking about, it works out as remarkably low cost per head and makes it on a cost-benefit basis much more viable for the Police Federation to do. You stated, of course, that most members aren't interested in compensation. For me, what this is about is recognising that the government have been found to unlawfully discriminated against a group of our members. It seems only right and proper that those of that group that wish to be considered for compensation because they consider they've suffered injury to feelings or out-of-pocket expenditure, they have the opportunity for that to be duly considered by the courts. Frankly, if there are other people who have no interest in that or don't feel that they've suffered in that way, then they shouldn't claim, because they'd be claiming for something they don't feel they've suffered. But those people who do feel that they've suffered as a direct result of that unlawful discrimination, I think it's absolutely right and proper that we make sure that their cases are considered properly by the court.
And I appreciate that really full answer, but we sort of skirted around the costs still.
Yeah.
Because, what if the award is small? I mean, how does that, you said, well, there's advantage of taking mass claims and playing the numbers game, so to speak. But, what are we talking about with cost to individual members for running such a large claim?
Yeah, so, I mean, clearly we don't know what the total number of members who will sign up to this are. We know that we've got, say, 23,000 currently lodged, and that number will only go up. I think it's reasonable to say that based on the projection that we see at the moment, we're talking about a cost of little more than a few pounds a claim.
Okay.
And for a few pounds a claim, it's clearly worthwhile and justifiable for us to do. Alongside, however, we said we would follow the progress of the pension claim. We said that we would continually review our position. When the government lost the discrimination claim with the firefighters and the judges, they announced that they were conceding the discrimination across the public sector and they would rectify it. On that basis, we didn't need to take any claims. Unfortunately, they wouldn't give us the assurances that they would consider the compensatory issue in relation to those that hadn't claimed. That can't be right. Having accepted at this stage that they did unlawfully discriminate against a group of people, it can't be right that they're not given the opportunity to have their claims considered. And that's why we've lodged this.
Perfect. Now, you did cover this briefly, but I just want to add a bit more emphasis to this to give reassurance to those people who are watching this video. There's a large group of officers that have obviously resigned, that have been ill health retired, or just decided to change their careers, but they're eligible to claim. We know what work's being done to ensure that they are offered and afforded this opportunity.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you raised that. They're very much uppermost, to be fair, not just in our mind, but also when it comes to remedying the discrimination. The government have made clear that they recognise that group of people who are in receipt of pensions as we speak need to be prioritised, because they're the people who this is having a difference to, and a detrimental difference to potentially, on a monthly income basis now. This isn't for them something that could affect them in 5-6 years' time. It's something that's affecting them now, and they need to have that rectified. From our point of view, we have got a plan in place. So what we've done is we've started by contacting serving officers whose false email addresses we have on our database. Obviously that's a significant number of individuals, and we're dealing with that, the responses to that now. Alongside that, what we've done is share the email and the link to be able to register a claim with local branch secretaries, so that they can make contact with those individuals they know have no longer got access to force systems, whether they've retired, working away, on a career break, maternity leave, any of those types of groups. We're backing that up by putting out as much publicity as we can, whether that's on our website, in our magazine, social media channels. We'll reach out to partners like NARPO, for example. So we're using as many different ways as we can to get the message out. Unfortunately, there isn't, as you know, one single easy answer to reach all, but we are doing everything in our utmost to actually make sure the message gets out as wide as possible to all affected.
Thank you. That's really reassuring. So I've got one more question to hit you with. And this is in relation to obviously the claim itself and the bigger picture. There's a lot of people out there that know about the judges and the firefighters case, the McLeod Sargent ruling from the Court of Appeal. A lot of people know the implications of that case have ramifications across the public sector, but we're talking about policing. So now, with the fact that we're discussing pensions and claims, members have said, well, do I actually need to register with this Police Federation claim to ensure that the remedy is applied to my pension? Do I have to be part of this claim to ensure that I move back to my old pension scheme? Because that's, people worrying, saying, well, if I don't sign up, I'll lose out.
Yeah, I can understand the worry, and pensions is extremely complicated, which I think sometimes causes additional confusion. The short answer is no, you don't. So the government are entirely committed and are actively working at this very moment to apply a rectification to all who were victims of this, whether they lodged a claim, whether they don't lodge a claim. This is entirely around the compensation issue. So what does that mean? It means if you were discriminated against and you haven't taken a claim, and you don't take a claim, you will be given the opportunity to revert back to the former pension scheme you were in for what they call the remedy period. That's the period effectively from when you were moved into the new scheme to a date to be agreed in the future, when everybody would then thereafter be in the same new scheme. That's if you do nothing, you're going to get that. This is entirely about what, if any, compensation you should be awarded for any injury to your feelings you've suffered or out-of-pocket expenses. And you may feel that you haven't had any. You know, you may feel that actually that's not something, or you may feel I'm not looking for that, in which case there is nothing you need to do. But if you do feel that you are and should be considered for compensation, that's why, in addition to getting the opportunity to revert back to the old pension, that's when you should apply for this.
So I suppose I just want to finish off with one question which I hadn't written down, but it leads me into what you've said. You know, for a lot of people, you know, we're talking court cases, we're talking government rectifying the discriminatory element. I know you've been involved in, you know, pensions meetings with government, with scheme advisors, etc. You know, is there light at the end of the tunnel for this, Alex? I mean, what can we look at realistically before we actually see some sort of change taking place?
Yeah, there is light. Look, this is an extremely complicated picture, and it's complicated for those in the pension world. So I have every sympathy with people who are, you know, trying to understand this alongside doing their day job. Where are we at the moment? So the government, having recognised that they need to fix this, have asked the various scheme advisors to comment on their thoughts as to how best this could actually be done. Those meetings have happened, that feedback's been given, and the government are currently looking at it and pulling the bones, if you like, out of it. So the next stage is sometime around the late summer they will come out with their formal consultation on what they're intending to do to rectify this. And there will be a period of about 6 weeks, we think, formal consultation, where the various groups will be able to comment on that. They'll then have to consider those comments and make any changes they feel fit. And about the autumn of this year, we will see what the government's intended way to rectify this is. That's still a bit of a journey, because it will undoubtedly involve changes in law to be able to do that. And then they will need to get into each different scheme's uniqueness, if you like. So we know in policing, for example, we can retire earlier than other parts of the public sector. So they will need to look at how that impacts on their proposed approach and potentially introduce the legislation for that as well. Right. That's why, at the moment, the working assumption is that this remedy period we refer to is unlikely to end before the 1st of April 2022.
So that if we're looking at any light at the end of the tunnel, the earliest is probably around April 2022.
Look, I think you will know long before then. I think we will know, we'll have a fair idea in the summer about what kind of approach they're intending to take. I think by the autumn, we'll know exactly what that approach is. And then it's just a question of letting them work through it. Massive amount of work, because every individual undoubtedly will have a choice to make. If you're an affected individual, do you want to be in the old scheme or the scheme you're in?
For a lot of people, that's a no-brainer, Alex.
Well, on the face of it, it possibly is. But remember, there's a group of people who went from the 1987 scheme into the care scheme. And I think we all recognise that for a lot of them, they'd have been better off in the 87 scheme. But there's another group of people who went from the 2006 scheme into the care scheme. And actually, when you look at them, a majority of them may well be better off to stay in the care scheme. What's important, though, is that every individual is given all of the information they need to be able to understand what each of those decisions means to them financially. And there is a requirement and an acceptance that every individual will have to be given that. You can imagine, though, for the pension people, that's an awful lot of work, and it's going to take some time to work through. But that's what's got to happen, so that by the time they come to you and say, what do you want to do, you're able to look at their figures in black and white and say, that's my decision, and I can say that with some certainty about what it means for me.
Perfect.
Folks, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, there's a load of information on our website as well. So if you go there and navigate over to Police Pensions Claim, There's further FAQs, there's a previous video that we did, and importantly there's a link to submit additional questions which we hope to answer in the next video. Thank you.